Let me start by mentioning one more thing about classes, and then we'll open it for questions, and maybe we'll do one more example if you guys want or something, or work on your project. One of the things that I haven't mentioned, because there is a finite amount of time, is enums, enumerations. They will not be on the test. You're not responsible for knowing this stuff. I will never ask you about it. But it may not be a bad idea for you to know, right? Many times we have a set of values that we want to have only a set. And that's what enumerations are for. So, for example, I could define do static. This is a class that has two values. Maybe it actually works. I'm doing something wrong. I know that I'm doing something wrong. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, we're having issues here. So this was static. Yay. So, in the simplest way, I could define an enum, oh, thank you, an enumerated variable, right, for gender. And without getting into sociology, let's assume, please bear with me, that we have two genders, they are male and female, right? And so this creates a type. It is a type that contains two values, male and female, right? And so I can have a gender here, and then I can have this guy. Okay, let me keep this guy so our code still works. And then have this, right? Now, I chose to define this gender type inside the person class, right? So if I were to refer to it, I would refer to it as person.gender, right? And so in my main, where I create a person, I can do person.gender.male. And Oscar is also a guy. But Linda is a lady. Does this make sense? You could define gender outside of the person class, then you wouldn't use person.gender, and with imports you can actually make it so. What is the good thing about this, right? Actually, one more thing that we want to do. Did I do that? Oh, I did not. So I'm gonna auto-generate my toString, and we'll see a cool thing. Code generate Now let me go here, call we had renamed our method for people as no main, right? And so we can actually do system out print line P1, which would be a person, and then I can call here no main. One cool thing is that it prints the right way. And it is basically an int, except with nice names, right? And Java takes care of making sure that they get assigned different ints. So male will be 0 and female will be 1, or male will be 35 and female will be 36. You don't care. Does that idea make sense? So that just it's just nice sometimes. I don't use it in any of the assignments or anything like that. But any questions about enums? Now, I actually don't use them in real life because I deal with database stuff, and so normally I read my things from a database, so I can never put them in my code. But I never know the full set of things that I deal with. But in certain domains, it's very useful to do these kinds of things. Okay, any questions about enums? Now, questions about classes in general? Questions about the assignment? Yes, or generic questions about the assignments rather than I have a semicolon and it's not working. Now, should we try to come up with a couple more examples of classes, or should we just stop and work on the assignment? One more example. Let me do you guys play cards?
Not well.
Do you know cards? No.
Decently.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
Well,
Never mind. What would be a good thing to model? What? Coins? Ah. Yeah. Do we want to model coins? And are coins different than just an enum? Courses and things like that. Yeah, let's do courses. Except that, okay, let's do courses and what does a course have? Sorry? Ooh, maybe. No, but let's do the easy stuff first. What does a course have?
Number and name.
String, number, right? Maybe int level, right? And we can, right, that's the 5,000, 6,000, that kind of stuff, right? Yes, no, maybe. A course doesn't have a capacity. A course offering has a capacity, right? So how do we represent, and this is gonna mess me up, but okay, let me create a new one. what does a course offering have? Has a course, right? Then it has a capacity, maybe a string term, and maybe, for now, string classroom. Stuff like this, right? Does this make sense? This is cool, right? We can include any kind of types in our classes, in our fields, including types that we just defined, right? Does that make sense? So that is cool. Now we get into horrible stuff, and I will use this to kind of prime your brain for the next stuff that we're going to do, right? Could we represent prerequisites?
What?
Prerequisites for courses? Like in order to take data structures, you need to have taken this course, right? How would we represent that?
That would be just an if statement. Basically, if or
This is data, right? Not if. So how would we represent the prerequisites for a course? We could do this course, right? What's the problem with this?
There's more than one prerequisite.
There could be more than one prerequisite, right?
yes.
Which means we need some way of express a bunch, right? Next week, we'll cover arrays, which are a way of doing bunches of things of the same type, collections of things of the same type, and then in the following week we will cover collections and iterators and things like that, like lists, an array list, and math, and all those guys. Right now we cannot. So I'm gonna assume that this never existed until next week. Remind me next week and we'll do it.
But could you call a class inside itself?
You're not calling a class inside itself, right? You are
Define.
putting an object. Yeah, I could do course prerequisite. Yes. By default, and actually this is important, by default, objects in Java get initialized to null, which is a special value that belongs to, that could be any kind of object. So, when we were creating this guy, right, in main, we could do course C1 equals new course level equals 5, C1 dot number equals CS 5000. Yes, we call it course number and it's not number. Oh, we didn't, oh, name, right? What do we call this thing? Foundations of programming or accelerated? Whatever the name of this class is. Something like that, right? Foundations, introduction. Or actually, better name, CS 5000. Then does anybody knows the number for data structures? 50 5040. That's not the right name, but so I can do this, right?
And that's a reference for the variable name, right? Not for the string.
This CS5000 is the variable name, yes. No. Right? Ooh. Do we want to break brains? What's the obvious extension of this? Besides this stuff, right? And this stuff is very powerful, right? You can have a bunch of classes that refer to each other, right? That is cool. What would be kind of the obvious thing that would, it's not too terribly complicated, but complicates this? Recursion, right? So, you deal with this a lot more in data structures, but let's do string list. I'm going to create a class and I'm going to call it string list, right? Inside, I'm going to create a static my class node, my string list node contains a string, which I'm going to call data, and a node, a reference to another node that I'm going to call next, right? Now my list contains a node head. Does this make sense? Now I'm going to define a function called add at beginning, right? Actually, do I want to create, let me create a constructor just to make my life easier. Let's do this and let me. Create a main method. What would this print? What am I doing here, right? What happens when I create a string? Did I do, ooh, that wouldn't do that. How it works, right? What happens when I create this new string list? Right? What's L gonna contain? L contains one variable, right? What variable does it contain? Head. Which would be initialized to what? No, right? It's not nothing, it's no. No is something, it's no. It's a specific thing. Nothing is nothing. Right? What happens when we do add at beginning, right? We are going to create a new node, right? That's going to contain the data. We are calling add at beginning with 1, right? So it's going to create a new node that contains the data, and then as its next, that new node is going to have the old value of head, which is null, right? Then now head is going to point to that thing. So, and I'm sorry if you are online, we have L, which has head, and now head is going to point to a node that's going to have 1 and null. Does that make sense? And then when I call add at beginning of 2, now head is going to point to a node that contains 2 and whose next actually points to the node with 1. Does that make sense? And then when I call L dot add at beginning 3, I'm going to have pointing to 2. And so L is going to be this list. When I call L.printall, I create a node variable called current, initialize it to the head, which will be that reference to the node that contains 3, right? While current is different than null, I'm going to do this. So print current.data, it will print 3. Make current equals current.next, so now current will point to the node that contains 2, right? And so eventually this would print 3, 2, and 1. Isn't this cool? Now our data structure is recursive. The node data structure is recursive, right? Isn't this cool? You can think of it as horribly complicated or as just obvious, right? It's a node. It has another node. So be it, right? It's a course, it can have another courses as prerequisites. It's a person, it may have another people as partners, right? Does this make sense? We will not use terribly complicated stuff in this class. You will use terribly complicated stuff next semester in your data structures class. So, whenever you take your data structures class. But yes, we can have instances of a class inside objects of the same class. Isn't this cool? Any other questions? We want to do other examples. Do we want to go work on the assignment? Yes? Let's go work on our turtles. Let me close this guy if I can find how to. Finder has it.